The diplomatic vehicle passed through the East Gate at 4:37 in the afternoon. Sergeant Thomas Wright noted the time out of habit. Years of military service had trained him to notice patterns. The black Range Rover, with tinted windows and royal plates, wasn't unusual by itself. What caught his attention was the timing. Camilla's official schedule showed no departures until 6. He'd reviewed the daily movement logs that morning, like he always did. The Queen Consort was meant to be hosting a private tea in the green drawing room, yet here was her primary vehicle, leaving 2 hours early, driven by someone who wasn't her regular driver. Wright stood at his post near the King's Door entrance. He watched the Range Rover slow at the security checkpoint, then accelerate toward the main gates. Something about the way it moved felt wrong. Not suspicious enough to raise an alarm. Just off. He pulled out his radio. "Control, this is Wright at King's Door. Can you confirm Queen Consort's movement schedule?" Static crackled. "Stand by." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard. Wright had been a royal guard for 8 years. Before that, multiple deployments overseas. He'd learned to trust the feeling in his gut when details didn't line up. The small things that seemed irrelevant until they weren't. "Right, control confirms Queen Consort is still in Palace. Green drawing room, as scheduled." "Copy that." Wright lowered his radio. So who was in her car? 20 minutes later, the same Range Rover returned. This time it entered through the south gate and parked in the service area behind the royal apartments. Wright couldn't see it from his position, but he heard it over the security channel. Vehicle logged in. Driver identified as Marcus Henley. Backup staff driver. Nothing unusual noted, except Marcus Henley had never driven for the Queen Consort before. Wright knew the regular rotation. He knew every driver, every vehicle, every standard route. This wasn't standard. His shift ended at 6. He should have logged out, gone home, forgotten about the timing discrepancy. Instead, he found himself walking toward the service area, just checking, making sure everything was fine. The Range Rover sat in its designated space, engine ticking as it cooled. The rear windows were dark. Wright approached from the side, keeping his movements casual. He wasn't investigating. He was just a guard doing a routine walkthrough. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. Drop a comment below where you're watching from. Now, back to what happened next. As Wright passed the vehicle, he noticed something on the rear passenger window. A small handprint, child-sized, on the inside of the glass. Fresh enough that moisture still clung to the edges. His pulse quickened. He circled to the driver's side. The door was unlocked. Not unusual for a vehicle in the secure service area. But Wright's instincts screamed at him to look closer. He opened the door. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Something sweet, like the strawberry candies the young royals favoured. On the floor behind the driver's seat, partially hidden under the mat, lay a small navy cardigan. Wright recognised it immediately. Princess Charlotte had worn it that morning. He'd seen her leave for her lessons wearing the school uniform sweater, distinctive with its embroidered crest. Why would her cardigan be in Camilla's vehicle? Wright picked it up carefully. The fabric was still slightly warm. She'd been wearing it recently, within the last few hours. He set it back down exactly as he'd found it and pulled out his phone. Protocol required documentation before disturbing potential evidence. 3 photos from different angles. Then he examined the rest of the interior without touching anything else. A water bottle on the back seat. The expensive kind from the palace kitchens, half empty. A small book wedged between the seats. Wright leaned in. The Secret Garden. Princess Charlotte's name was written inside the front cover in careful child's handwriting. His mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe Charlotte had ridden with Camilla somewhere. Maybe the items had been left behind innocently. But the timing didn't match. Charlotte's afternoon schedule showed her in tutoring sessions until 5. She shouldn't have been in any vehicle at 4:30. Wright closed the car door and walked toward the guard command office. Each step felt heavier than the last. He knew what happened to guards who raised concerns about senior royals without solid evidence: reassignment, early retirement, quiet dismissal. But he also knew what happened when guards ignored warning signs. Captain Richard Wells sat behind his desk, reviewing the evening shift assignments. He looked up when Wright entered, his expression neutral. "Wright, your shift ended 20 minutes ago." "Sir, I need to report something." Wright kept his voice steady. "I found items belonging to Princess Charlotte in the Queen Consort's vehicle. The car left palace grounds during an unscheduled departure this afternoon." Wells set down his pen. "Items?" "Her school cardigan, a water bottle, a book with her name in it." "You searched the Queen Consort's vehicle?" Wells's tone sharpened. "The door was unlocked. I observed items in plain view during a routine security walkthrough." Wright had been careful. Everything he'd done was defensible under security protocols. Wells leaned back in his chair. "Princess Charlotte could have ridden with her grandmother for any number of reasons. The Queen Consort is family." "Sir, Charlotte's schedule shows her in lessons during the time that vehicle left the grounds. I verified with control before approaching the car." "Perhaps her schedule changed. Then why wasn't the movement logged?" The question hung in the air between them. Wells studied Wright for a long moment. "You're certain about the timing?" "Yes, sir. Vehicle departed at 4:37. Princess Charlotte was scheduled in the music room until 5. No schedule changes noted." Wells picked up his phone. "I'll check with the household staff. See if there was a change that didn't get updated in the system." He paused. "Right, you've been with us how long?" 8 years, sir." "Good record. Multiple commendations. No disciplinary issues." Wells met his eyes. "Don't create issues where there aren't any. Understand?" It was a warning. A clear one. "Drop this and walk away." Wright nodded. "Understood, sir." But as he left the office, his phone buzzed. A text from another guard, Corporal James Harding, who monitored the security cameras. "Right. Need to show you something. Camera room. Now." The security camera room was located in the basement level of the palace, accessed through a narrow corridor most visitors never saw. Harding sat in front of 6 monitors, footage streaming from dozens of cameras positioned throughout the grounds. "You asked Control about that Range Rover departure," Harding said, without looking away from the screens. "I pulled the footage. Thought you'd want to see it." He tapped a keyboard. One monitor switched to recorded footage time-stamped 4:28 that afternoon. The screen showed the south courtyard from an elevated angle. The Range Rover pulled up to a side entrance. The driver, Marcus Henley, got out and opened the rear passenger door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small figure emerged. Princess Charlotte. She wore her school uniform, but the cardigan was draped over her arm, not on her shoulders. Her head was down. She walked to the vehicle slowly, not with her usual confident stride. Camilla appeared in the frame, walking beside Charlotte. She placed one hand on the child's shoulder. It looked almost affectionate. Almost. But Wright noticed how Charlotte's posture stiffened at the touch. They spoke briefly. Camilla leaned down, saying something close to Charlotte's ear. Charlotte nodded once, then climbed into the vehicle. Camilla closed the door herself and stepped back, watching as the Range Rover drove away. "Where did they go?" Wright asked. Harding switched to another camera. "I tracked it through the grounds. It went to the north gate, exited, drove toward Windsor. Lost visual after it left palace property." He pulled up another timestamp. "Returned at 4:53. Watch what happens." The footage showed the Range Rover pulling back through the south gate. It parked in the service area. The driver got out and walked away. No one emerged from the back seat. "She stayed in the car?" Wright leaned closer to the monitor. "For 11 minutes. Harding fast-forwarded. At 5:04, Camilla appeared again. She opened the rear door. Charlotte climbed out. This time she was crying. Wright's jaw tightened. Camilla crouched beside Charlotte, speaking to her. Charlotte wiped her eyes and nodded. Camilla handed her something. It looked like a tissue, and gestured toward a service entrance. Charlotte walked toward it alone. Camilla remained by the car for several seconds, then opened the rear door again and appeared to straighten the interior. That's when she must have missed the cardigan under the mat. "Did you report this?" Wright asked. Harding shook his head. "To who? Queen Consort taking her granddaughter for a drive isn't illegal, but the fact that it wasn't logged, that Charlotte looked upset." He met Wright's eyes. "Something doesn't feel right." Wright thought about the handprint on the window, about Charlotte crying, about Camilla cleaning the car interior like she was hiding something. "I need to talk to Princess Charlotte." "You can't just approach her directly," Harding said. "Protocol." "I know the protocol." Wright pulled out his phone and opened the staff directory. "But I also know she has study session in the library tomorrow morning. I'm scheduled for East Wing Patrol. That's adjacent to the library corridor." Harding frowned. "You're putting your career on the line for a hunch." "It's not a hunch." Wright gestured at the monitor, showing Charlotte's tear-stained face. "That's a child who's frightened, and someone went to significant effort to make sure that trip wasn't officially documented." He didn't sleep well that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Charlotte's small handprint on the window. He saw her stiff posture when Camilla touched her shoulder. He saw her crying after whatever happened during that unlogged 11-minute drive. At 7 the next morning, Wright arrived for his shift early. He reviewed the day's schedules 3 times, memorizing every movement, every expected location of every royal family member. Princess Charlotte's morning tutoring session in the library was scheduled from 9 to 10:30. Prince William and Princess Kate were both off grounds, attending separate official engagements. King Charles was meeting with government ministers. Camilla's schedule showed a private morning in her apartments, which meant Charlotte would be with her tutors, supervised, safe. At 8:45, Wright positioned himself in the East Wing corridor adjacent to the library. His official patrol wrote, nothing suspicious about a guard being exactly where he was supposed to be. He watched palace staff move through the corridors. Housekeepers with cleaning carts. Private secretaries carrying folders. A chef heading toward the kitchens. Normal morning activity. At 8:57, Princess Charlotte appeared at the far end of the corridor, walking with her tutor, Miss Elizabeth Hammond. Charlotte carried her books, her head down, moving slowly. Wright waited. Timing was everything. Too eager, and he'd alarm her. Too passive, and he'd miss his chance. Miss Hammond stopped to speak with another staff member, just for a moment. Charlotte stood slightly apart, waiting. Wright approached, keeping his movements casual. "Good morning, Your Highness." Charlotte looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She'd been crying recently. "Good morning," she said, quietly, with the reflexive politeness drilled into young royals. "Heading to your lesson?" She nodded. Wright lowered his voice. "Your Highness, I found your cardigan yesterday, in a vehicle. I wanted to make sure you're all right." Charlotte's expression changed. Fear flashed across her face, quickly suppressed. She glanced at Miss Hammond, still engaged in conversation a few feet away. "I'm fine," Charlotte whispered, but her hands tightened on her books. "If something's wrong, you can tell me. It's my job to keep you safe." She said, Charlotte stopped herself, "I'm not supposed to talk about it." Wright's pulse quickened. "Who said that?" Charlotte's eyes darted toward Miss Hammond again. The tutor was finishing her conversation. Time was running out. "Your Highness, if someone is making you uncomfortable, or if you're scared, I have to go." Charlotte's voice cracked slightly. She hurried toward Miss Hammond, who smiled and guided her toward the library entrance. Wright watched them disappear through the ornate doors. Charlotte had looked terrified. Not of him, of talking. Someone had told her to stay silent, and Wright would bet his entire career he knew who. He needed more than gut feelings and a child's frightened reaction. He needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. His phone buzzed, a text from Harding. "More footage. You need to see this." Wright headed back to the camera room, his mind racing through possibilities. What had happened during that 11-minute drive? Where had they actually gone? And why was Camilla so determined to keep it secret? What Wright didn't know yet was that the evidence he needed was still in that Range Rover, hidden in a place no one had thought to look. And when he found it, everything would change. Not just for Princess Charlotte, for the entire royal family. Harding had pulled up footage from multiple cameras, creating a timeline of the previous afternoon. "I went back further," he said, gesturing at the screens. "Started at 3 p.m. Watch this." The monitor showed the corridor outside the music room, where Charlotte had been scheduled for her lesson. Then at 3:45, Charlotte emerged with her music instructor, Mrs. Davies. They walked toward the practice rooms. Normal, expected. But at 4:10, Camilla appeared in the same corridor. She spoke briefly with Mrs. Davies. The instructor nodded, gathered her materials, and left. Camilla then entered the practice room where Charlotte waited. "Can you get audio?" Wright asked. "No microphones in the practice rooms. Privacy protocols." Harding fast-forwarded. "But watch the body language." 8 minutes later, Camilla and Charlotte emerged together. Charlotte's posture had changed completely. Her shoulders were hunched. She walked half a step behind Camilla, not beside her. She dismissed the instructor, Wright said. Took Charlotte out of her scheduled lesson. Without logging it, without notifying the princess's parents. Harding switched to another camera. And look where they went. The footage showed Camilla and Charlotte walking through a service corridor, avoiding the main halls. They used the staff passages, the routes that didn't have as much camera coverage. "She knew where the blind spots were," Wright said quietly. "Gets better." Harding pulled up another angle. "I checked the vehicle logs. That Range Rover. It was requested at 3 p.m., an hour before Camilla pulled Charlotte from her lesson. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned." Wright felt cold certainty settling in his chest. This wasn't a grandmother taking her grandchild for an impromptu drive. This was premeditated, calculated. "I need to search that vehicle properly," Wright said. "Captain Wells will never authorize it." "Then I won't ask for authorization." Harding turned in his chair. "Wright, think about what you're saying. You're talking about searching the Queen Consort's personal vehicle without permission. That's not bending protocol. That's shattering it. A child is frightened. Someone is hiding something." Wright met his friend's eyes. "If I'm wrong, I'll accept the consequences. But if I'm right, and I do nothing..." Harding was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up the current security feed, showing the service area. The Range Rover is still there. Marcus Henley doesn't start his shift until noon. You've got maybe 3 hours before anyone goes near that vehicle. Wright checked his watch. 9:20. "Cover for me if anyone asks where I am." "What am I supposed to say?" "Tell them I'm doing a perimeter check. Extended patrol." Wright headed toward the door, then stopped. "Harding, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If this goes sideways, we're both finished." The service area was quiet. Most palace staff were occupied with morning duties in other sections of the grounds. Wright approached the Range Rover carefully, scanning for any cameras with direct line of sight. One camera covered the area, but from an angle that wouldn't clearly show the vehicle's interior. He pulled on evidence gloves, standard issue for guards dealing with suspicious items. If he was going to do this, he'd do it properly. The rear door opened with a soft click. Wright started with the obvious places. Under the seats, in the door pockets, the center console. He found nothing unusual. Some paperwork, a spare umbrella, hand sanitizer, normal items. But his training had taught him to look deeper. People hiding things rarely put them in obvious places. He pulled up the floor mats, checked under them. Nothing. He examined the seat backs, looking for any compartments or loose panels. The Range Rover was luxurious, well appointed, lots of small storage areas. In the pocket behind the driver's seat, he found a palace map, the kind given to new staff members to help them navigate the grounds. Why would Camilla need that? She'd lived in the palace for years. Wright unfolded it. Someone had marked several locations with small pencil dots. The North Wing storage rooms, the old chapel that was rarely used, a groundskeeper's cottage near the perimeter wall. Isolated places. Places where someone could take a child without being easily observed. His hands tightened on the map. He photographed it with his phone, then returned it to the pocket exactly as he'd found it. Keep looking. There had to be more. Wright opened the rear cargo area, luggage compartment, storage bins. He lifted the cover panel that concealed the spare tire well and froze. Beneath the panel, wedged beside the spare tire, was a small wooden box, about the size of a jewelry case. Wright lifted it carefully. It wasn't locked. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, he found a child's silver bracelet, engraved on the inside, Charlotte Elizabeth Diana. A birthday gift. Wright had seen her wear it. Why was it hidden in Camilla's vehicle? He photographed it without removing it from the box. Then he noticed something else, a folded piece of paper beneath the tissue. Wright unfolded it carefully. It was a handwritten note. The handwriting was precise, controlled, adult handwriting. Remember what we discussed. Your parents don't need to know about our special trips. This is just between us. If you tell anyone, they won't understand. They'll be angry with you, not me. You don't want to upset your mother, do you? She has enough to worry about. Be a good girl and keep our secret. There was no signature. But Wright recognized the letterhead at the top of the page, Queen Consort Stationery. His stomach turned. This was manipulation. Psychological pressure on a child. Making Charlotte responsible for keeping secrets. Making her afraid to speak. He photographed up the note from every angle, making sure every word was clearly visible. Then he carefully returned everything to exactly how he'd found it. The box, the panel, the floor mats, evidence secured, documented. Now he needed someone who would actually act on it, not Captain Wells. Wells had already made clear he wouldn't challenge Camilla without overwhelming proof. Not the household staff. They answered to the senior royals. Not Palace Security Administration. Too many layers, too much bureaucracy. Wright needed to go directly to someone who would put Charlotte's safety above palace politics. Prince William. But you couldn't just approach the heir to the throne with accusations against his stepmother. There were protocols, chains of command. And Wright had already violated several regulations by searching the vehicle. He pulled out his phone and texted Harding, "Need contact info for Prince William's private secretary. Urgent." The response came 30 seconds later. "You're really doing this?" "Already done. I have evidence. Need to deliver it to someone who will act." Another pause. Then, "Robert Davenport, private secretary to Prince of Wales. Office in the North Wing. But Wright, he won't see you without appointment." "Then I'll wait outside his office until he does." Wright locked the Range Rover and walked back through the service corridors. His career was probably over, regardless of what happened next. But that didn't matter anymore. He'd seen the note. He'd seen Charlotte's bracelet hidden like contraband. He'd seen the fear in her eyes that morning. Some things were more important than career. What he discovered next changed everything. But first, if you're enjoying this story, drop a like and let us know in the comments. Would you have done the same? Now, here's what the guard found. Robert Davenport's office was located on the third floor of the north wing, accessible through a corridor lined with portraits of previous monarchs. Wright had never been in this section of the palace. Royal guards typically stayed in public areas and security zones, not administrative wings. He found the office at 9:53. The door was closed. A small placard read, "Robert Davenport, Private Secretary to the Prince of Wales, by appointment only." Wright knocked. "Yes?" The voice from inside was crisp, efficient. Wright opened the door. Davenport sat behind a mahogany desk covered with papers and folders. He was in his mid-50s, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his grey hair immaculately combed. He looked up with the expression of someone perpetually interrupted. "Mr. Davenport, I'm Sergeant Thomas Wright, Royal Guard. I need to speak with Prince William, urgently, regarding Princess Charlotte's safety." Davenport's expression didn't change. "Sergeant, the Prince of Wales is currently at a housing development opening in Essex. He won't return until this evening. If you have security concerns, they should be directed through Captain Wells." "Captain Wells has declined to act on the information I've gathered." "Then perhaps that should tell you something about the validity of your concerns." Davenport returned his attention to the papers on his desk. "Good day, Sergeant." Wright didn't move. "Someone is manipulating Princess Charlotte, isolating her, taking her on unlogged trips away from palace grounds. I have photographic evidence and video footage." Davenport's pen stopped moving. He looked up slowly. "Those are serious allegations. Against whom?" "Queen Consort Camilla." The silence that followed was heavy. Davenport set down his pen very carefully. "Sergeant Wright, do you understand the implications of what you're suggesting?" "Yes, sir. I understand I'm probably ending my career. But I also understand that a child is being frightened into keeping secrets. And I have evidence to prove it." Davenport studied him for a long moment. "Show me." Wright pulled out his phone and opened the photo gallery. He showed Davenport the images of Charlotte's cardigan and book in the vehicle, the marked palace map, the hidden box containing her bracelet, and finally, the note. Davenport's expression grew darker as he scrolled through the images. When he reached the note, he read it twice. "Where is this box now?" "Still in the vehicle. I documented everything but left it in place. Chain of evidence." "And the video footage?" "Corporal Harding has it secured in the camera room. Shows Camilla removing Charlotte from her scheduled lesson, taking her through service corridors, and the unlogged vehicle departure." Davenport stood. "Wait here." He left the office. Wright heard him speaking to someone in the corridor, voice low and urgent. Then, footsteps fading. Wright stood in the empty office, his heart pounding. He'd crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back now. Either he'd done the right thing, or he'd just destroyed himself over a misunderstanding. But he thought about Charlotte's face that morning, the fear in her eyes, the way she'd whispered. She said, "I'm not supposed to talk about it." No, this wasn't a misunderstanding. 15 minutes passed. 20. Wright remained standing, not wanting to presume to sit in Davenport's office without permission. Finally, footsteps returned. Davenport entered, followed by a woman in her late 40s wearing a Metropolitan Police uniform, Detective Inspector Sarah Chen. "Sergeant Wright," Chen said. "I'm with the Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit. Mr. Davenport has briefed me on your concerns. I need to see everything you've documented." Wright went through it again. The timeline, the footage, the physical evidence. Chen took notes, asking specific questions about timing, about chain of custody, about Wright's observations of Charlotte's behavior. "You're certain the handwriting on this note is the Queen Consort's?" Chen asked. "I'm not a handwriting expert, but it's on her personal stationery, and the content—" Wright gestured at the phone screen. "Who else would write something like that to Princess Charlotte?" Chen nodded. "The vehicle is still in the service area?" "Yes, ma'am. Untouched since I documented the evidence." I'll need to secure it immediately before anyone has opportunity to remove or alter contents. She looked at Davenport. We need to brief the Prince of Wales as soon as he returns. This can't wait. Davenport checked his watch. He's due back at 2 p.m. He has a clear window from 2:30 to 3:15 before his next engagement. Set it up. Chen turned back to Wright. Sergeant, you'll need to be present to provide your account directly. Are you prepared for that? Wright straightened. Yes, ma'am. Good. Until then, you're to speak to no one about this investigation. That includes Captain Wells, other guards, palace staff. No one. Understood? Understood. Chen left to secure the vehicle. Davenport studied Wright with an unreadable expression. You've put yourself in a very difficult position, Sergeant. If these allegations prove unfounded, they won't. You'll face significant consequences, but Davenport's expression softened slightly. If you're correct, you may have prevented something far worse. The Prince of Wales takes his children's welfare extremely seriously. He'll want answers. Wright spent the next 4 hours in a small conference room adjacent to Davenport's office. He wasn't under arrest, but he wasn't free to leave either. He was given tea and sandwiches, which he couldn't eat. His stomach was twisted into knots. At 1:45, Harding texted him. Where are you? Wells is asking questions. Wright didn't respond. Chen had ordered silence. At 2:07, he heard vehicles pulling up outside, doors closing, voices in the corridor. Prince William had returned. At 2:33, Davenport opened the conference room door. Sergeant Wright, the Prince of Wales will see you now. Wright followed him down the corridor to a private study. The room was smaller than he'd expected. Book-lined walls, a desk, several comfortable chairs. Prince William stood by the window, still wearing his suit from the morning's engagement. He turned as Wright entered. Sergeant Wright. William's voice was controlled, but Wright could see the tension in his jaw. Robert tells me you have concerns about my daughter. Yes, Your Royal Highness. Wright's mouth was dry. I believe Princess Charlotte is being manipulated and isolated by someone within the household. Be specific. Wright laid it out, every detail. The unscheduled vehicle departure. The video footage showing Camilla removing Charlotte from her lesson and using service corridors. The evidence hidden in the Range Rover. Charlotte's frightened reaction that morning. William listened without interrupting. His expression grew progressively harder as Wright spoke. This note, William said finally. Detective Inspector Chen has secured it. Yes, sir, along with Princess Charlotte's bracelet and the marked palace map, all documented and preserved as evidence. And you're certain my daughter was in that vehicle yesterday? Yes, sir. Video footage shows her entering and exiting. Her personal items were inside, and... Wright hesitated. Sir, when I spoke to her this morning, she said she told me not to talk about it. Princess Charlotte was frightened. Someone has instructed her to keep secrets. William's hands clenched. Where is Camilla now? Davenport consulted his phone. In her private apartments. She's due at a charity reception at 4 p.m. Cancel it. William's voice was cold. Tell her I need to speak with her immediately. Here. And I want that vehicle brought to the East Courtyard. I want to see this evidence myself. Sir, Davenport began. Now, Robert. Davenport left quickly. William turned back to Wright. You understand you've made serious allegations against the Queen Consort. If you're wrong... I'm not wrong, sir. I wish I was. William studied him. You served in the military before joining the Royal Guard? Yes, sir. Multiple deployments overseas. Then you know what it means to put yourself at risk for others. William's expression softened slightly. My daughter's safety is more important than palace politics or anyone's reputation, including Camilla's. If what you've found is real... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. 10 minutes later, The Range Rover was parked in the east courtyard, usually reserved for official arrivals. Detective Inspector Chen stood beside it, wearing evidence gloves. William approached the vehicle. Wright and Davenport followed. "Your Royal Highness," Chen said, "I've secured all items exactly as Sergeant Wright documented them. The box is in the rear cargo area." William opened the rear door and knelt beside the tire well. Chen lifted the panel. The wooden box sat exactly where Wright had found it. William opened it. His jaw tightened when he saw Charlotte's bracelet. He unfolded the note and read it. The silence stretched. When William finally spoke, his voice was barely controlled. "This is psychological manipulation. This is—" He stopped, clearly fighting to maintain composure. "She's 8 years old." "Yes, sir," Chen said quietly. William read the note again. "They'll be angry with you, not me. Making Charlotte responsible for keeping secrets. Making her afraid to tell her parents." He looked at Chen. "Where's Charlotte now?" "With her tutor in the library. We have an officer stationed nearby. She's safe. I want her brought to Kate's private sitting room immediately. Not by palace staff, by one of your officers. And I want her examined by Dr. Morrison. Physical and psychological evaluation." "Already arranged, sir. Dr. Morrison is standing by." William stood, still holding the note. He turned to Wright. "You could have ignored this. Many people would have." "No, sir, I couldn't. My daughter trusts royal guards. You've proven that trust isn't misplaced." William's expression hardened again. "Now, let's deal with Camilla." They returned to the private study. William positioned himself behind the desk. Wright stood by the door at William's instruction. Chen and Davenport remained in the room as witnesses. At 3:05, there was a knock. Davenport opened the door. Camilla entered, smiling. "William, darling, Robert said you needed to see me urgently. Is everything—" She stopped when she saw Chen's uniform. Her smile faltered. "What's going on?" William placed the note on the desk in front of her. "I need you to explain this." Camilla picked up the note. Her hand was steady. She read it once. Her expression, neutral. Then she set it down carefully and looked at William. "Where did you get this?" "That's not the relevant question." William's voice was ice. "The relevant question is why you wrote it. Why you've been taking Charlotte on unscheduled trips. Why you've been isolating her from her lessons and instructing her to keep secrets from her parents." "I don't know what you're talking about." Camilla's tone was reasonable, almost amused. "William, if someone has told you—" "No one told me anything." William gestured at Wright. "Sergeant Wright found evidence in your vehicle. Video footage shows you removing Charlotte from her scheduled lesson yesterday, taking her through service corridors, leaving palace grounds in an unlogged vehicle departure." Camilla glanced at Wright, then back at William. Her smile had vanished. "A guard went through my personal vehicle. A guard doing his job noticed irregularities and investigated." William's hands pressed flat against the desk. "Stop deflecting. Explain the note." "I don't have to explain anything to a guard who violated—" "You're explaining it to me, not to him." William's voice cut through her objection. "That's my daughter's bracelet hidden in your car. That's a note on your stationery telling her to keep secrets from Kate and me. That's Charlotte crying on camera after spending time alone with you." Camilla was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Colder, more calculated. "I'm her grandmother. I spend time with her. There's nothing sinister about that." "Then why wasn't it logged?" "I don't log every interaction with my grandchildren. You logged a vehicle departure. You requested a driver. But you didn't record Charlotte as a passenger." William picked up the note again. "And you certainly don't need to tell Charlotte that her mother doesn't need to know about your special trips. What are you doing with her, Camilla?" "Nothing inappropriate." Camilla's composure was cracking slightly. A muscle in her jaw twitched. She enjoys our time together. She's a lonely child, William. You and Kate are always so busy. Don't. William's voice was dangerous. Don't try to make this about our parenting. Camilla switched tactics. She softened her expression. I care about Charlotte. I wanted to spend quality time with her. Is that so terrible? Perhaps I should have been more transparent about our outings, but I didn't think. Where did you take her yesterday? The question was direct, specific. Camilla hesitated, just for a second, but Wright saw it. We drove around the grounds, talked, that's all. For 11 minutes? I don't time our conversations. William gestured to Chen. Show her the map. Chen placed an evidence bag on the desk. Inside was the palace map with marked locations. These locations were found in your vehicle, ma'am. The North Wing storage rooms, the old chapel, a groundskeeper's cottage near the perimeter, all isolated areas. Why were these marked? Camilla stared at the map. Her hand moved to her necklace. The tell Wright had noticed before. I don't know anything about that map. It was in your vehicle. Anyone could have put it there. Ma'am, Chen said calmly, we have your fingerprints on the map. We also have testimony from palace staff that you've been requesting access to those specific locations over the past 6 weeks. Would you like to explain why? Camilla's composure finally shattered. This is absurd. I'm the Queen Consort. You can't treat me like a criminal because a guard with a vendetta. Sergeant Wright has no vendetta, William interrupted. He has a job, protecting my family, which he's done admirably. He stood. You've been manipulating my daughter, isolating her, taking her to private locations and telling her to hide it from us. That note makes your intentions clear. You wanted control over Charlotte. You wanted secrets between her and her parents. That's not what I... Camilla stopped. She could see it in William's face. There would be no talking her way out of this. Charlotte has been evaluated by Dr. Morrison, William continued. She's exhibited signs of anxiety and fear. She's been having nightmares, and when asked about spending time with you, she became visibly distressed. He placed both hands on the desk, leaning forward. You're done. No more contact with my children. Any of them. Not supervised, not unsupervised, not at all. William, you're overreacting. I'm protecting my daughter from someone who has demonstrated she can't be trusted. William's voice dropped. You have 2 choices. You can leave quietly, cite health reasons, step back from public duties, or this becomes an official investigation with potential criminal charges for child endangerment and psychological abuse. Camilla's face went white. You wouldn't dare. The publicity. Try me. The silence that followed was absolute. Wright watched Camilla's expression cycle through anger, calculation, and finally something close to fear. She was realizing William meant every word. Your father, Camilla began, will support his grandchildren's safety above all else. William straightened. I'll be briefing him within the hour. I suspect his response will be similar to mine. Camilla looked at Chen, at Davenport, at Wright. Looking for an ally, she found none. This is because of her, Camilla said finally. Kate, she's poisoned you against me. Kate doesn't know yet. William's voice was cold. But when she finds out what you've done to our daughter, your complete removal from our lives will be the least of your concerns. Camilla stood. Her hands were shaking. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. You forgot that my children's welfare comes before palace politics, before family relationships, before everything. William picked up his phone. Robert will escort you back to your apartments. You'll remain there until arrangements are made for your departure. Departure? Camilla's voice rose. You're exiling me? I'm removing a threat to my daughter. Call it what you want. Camilla looked at Wright one more time. Her expression was pure venom. This is your fault. You couldn't mind your own business. That's enough. William's voice snapped like a whip. Sergeant Wright did exactly what he was supposed to do. He protected a child. He followed evidence. He acted with integrity. He moved around the desk. Something you clearly know nothing about. Davenport opened the door. Ma'am, if you'll come with me. Camilla walked toward the door, her movements stiff. She paused beside Wright. You've destroyed your career for nothing. Wright met her eyes. No, ma'am. I did my job. She left with Davenport. Chen closed the door behind them. William exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his shoulders. He looked exhausted suddenly. Detective Inspector, I need a full investigation. Everything Camilla has done with Charlotte over the past 2 months. Every interaction, every location. I need to know exactly what my daughter has been exposed to. Already underway, sir. We'll have a preliminary report within 24 hours. William nodded. Then he turned to Wright. Sergeant, I owe you an apology. Wright blinked. Sir? You reported concerns through proper channels and were dismissed. You risked your career because protocol failed to protect a child. William extended his hand. Thank you for having the courage to do what was right instead of what was easy. Wright shook his hand, not quite believing this was happening. I was just doing your job. I know. William's grip was firm, but many people would have looked the other way. Decided it wasn't their problem. You didn't. That matters. The final moments of this story are unforgettable. Stay with us until the end. Now here's what happened next. 20 minutes later, Wright stood in the corridor outside the private study, waiting while William went to see Charlotte. Chen had finished documenting the evidence. Davenport had escorted Camilla to her apartment, where she would remain under discreet supervision until arrangements could be finalized. Wright's phone buzzed, a text from Harding. What the hell is going on? Entire security detail is on alert. Did you start a war? Wright typed back. Something like that. Tell you later. But he couldn't shake the image of Camilla's face during the confrontation. The way she'd tried every manipulation tactic. Deflection. Blame. False innocence. Threats. And when none of it worked, pure hatred directed at the guard who'd exposed her. What had she been planning? What would have happened if Wright hadn't noticed that handprint on the window? If he'd dismissed the timing irregularities as coincidence? He thought about the marked locations on the map. Isolated places. Places where a child's cries wouldn't be heard. Wright felt sick. Sergeant Wright, a soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. Princess Kate stood in the corridor. She'd changed from whatever she'd been wearing at her morning engagement into casual clothes, jeans and a sweater. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. Wright straightened immediately. Your Royal Highness. William told me what you found, what you did. Kate's voice was thick with emotion. You saved my daughter from... I don't even know what, but thank you. Thank you for seeing what was happening when everyone else missed it. No! Kate stepped. Kate, closer. Don't diminish what you did. You put your career on the line for a child you barely know. You stood up to palace protocol and powerful people because you knew something was wrong. She wiped her eyes. That takes extraordinary courage. Wright didn't know what to say. He'd never expected gratitude. He'd expected consequences. Charlotte wants to see you, Kate continued. She's been asking about the guard who found her cardigan. She says you were kind to her this morning when she was scared. Kate's expression was fierce suddenly. And I want her to know that the people protecting her can be trusted, that when she's frightened, there are good people who will help. Of course, ma'am, whatever she needs. Kate led him to her private sitting room. It was warm, comfortable, nothing like the formal palace spaces. This felt like a real home. Charlotte sat on a sofa, wrapped in a blanket despite the room's warmth. She looked small, vulnerable. When she saw Wright, she set down the book she'd been holding. Your Highness, Wright said gently, how are you feeling? Better. Her voice was quiet. My dad said, he said you found things in the car, that you knew I was scared. Wright knelt, so he was at her eye level. I did, and I want you to know something important. What happened wasn't your fault. Adults should never ask children to keep secrets that make them uncomfortable, and you never have to be alone with anyone who frightens you. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. She said my mum would be angry if I told, that I'd get in trouble. Your mum isn't angry, Kate said, sitting beside Charlotte and pulling her close. Not with you. Never with you. She took me to places, Charlotte whispered. Cold places. She'd leave me there for a while. She said it was to teach me to be strong, that I needed to learn not to cry. A tear rolled down her cheek. But I was scared. It was dark and cold, and I didn't like it. Wright felt rage burn through him. Camilla had been conducting some twisted form of psychological torture, abandoning a child in dark, cold rooms to teach her strength. Kate held her daughter tighter, her own tears falling now. That's over. She will never be near you again. I promise. Charlotte looked at Wright. Thank you for finding my cardigan, and for being nice this morning. You didn't make me feel stupid for being scared. You're not stupid. You're brave. You knew something was wrong, and you were trying to figure out what to do. Wright smiled at her. That takes courage. Charlotte managed a small smile back. Kate stood, keeping one arm around Charlotte. Sergeant Wright, my husband mentioned you might face consequences for how you conducted this investigation. It's possible, ma'am. I violated several protocols. No, you won't. Kate's voice was firm. William and I will make sure of that. You'll face no disciplinary action. In fact, she glanced at Charlotte, then back at Wright. I'd like you on Charlotte's primary protection detail. If you're willing, I want someone watching her who has proven they'll put her safety first. Always. Wright was stunned. Ma'am, I'm honored. Yes, of course. Good. Kate's expression softened. Thank you again. Truly. Wright left them there, mother and daughter together, safe. As he walked back through the palace corridors, he felt the weight of the past 36 hours finally settle on him. He'd done it. Charlotte was safe. Camilla was neutralized. And somehow, impossibly, his career had survived. More than survived. He'd been promoted in all but name, assigned to personal protection for a princess who needed someone she could trust. 3 days later, Camilla quietly left the palace, citing health concerns and a need for privacy. The official statement was brief. No details, no scandal, just a gradual withdrawal from public duties. But behind palace walls, everyone knew what had really happened. Word spread through the guard ranks, through the household staff, through every level of royal operations. A guard had found evidence of abuse, had stood up to power, had protected a child at risk to himself, and most importantly, the right thing had been done. Wright returned to duty the following week. His first day on Charlotte's protection detail, she ran up to him in the corridor outside her classroom. Sergeant Wright, will you be here every day now? Most days, Your Highness, she beamed. Good. I feel safer when you're here. That, Wright thought, was worth everything. Captain Wells pulled him aside later that afternoon. Wright, I owe you an apology. When you came to me with concerns, I should have listened. I should have investigated immediately. You followed protocol, sir. Protocol failed. You didn't. Wells met his eyes. I won't make that mistake again. And for what it's worth, you've set a new standard. Every guard in this detail now knows. Protecting these children comes first. Before politics. Before careers. Before everything. Wright nodded. That was exactly how it should be. King Charles summoned him a week later. The meeting was private, brief. Charles thanked him personally for protecting his granddaughter. He didn't mention Camilla by name. He didn't need to. The royal family owes you a debt, Sergeant Wright. You acted with honor and integrity when it would have been easier to look away. That's the kind of service this family needs. Wright left that meeting feeling something he hadn't expected: pride. Not in himself specifically, but in the system that had ultimately worked. It had taken too long. It had required someone willing to break rules. But in the end, the child had been protected. 6 months later, Wright stood in the palace gardens watching Charlotte play with her brothers. She laughed freely now. The nightmares had stopped. The fear had faded. She was just a child again, allowed to be carefree and safe. Princess Kate approached, watching her daughter with a soft smile. "She's doing so much better. Dr. Morrison says the trauma is healing." "I'm glad, ma'am. She asks about you sometimes, wants to know if you're nearby." Kate glanced at him. "You gave her something important, the knowledge that when she's scared, someone will help, that she can trust the people protecting her." "That's how it should be." "Yes," Kate agreed. "It is. True duty isn't about following orders blindly. It's about knowing when rules matter less than doing what's right. It's about having the courage to stand up even when it's hard, even when you're alone, even when the consequences seem overwhelming." Sergeant Thomas Wright did that. He saw a child in danger, and he acted. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't defer to authority. He trusted his instincts and his training and his fundamental sense of right and wrong. And because of that, Princess Charlotte is safe. A predator was removed from her life. And everyone in the Royal Guard learned a powerful lesson. Protecting children means more than standing at doors and following protocols. It means being willing to risk everything when a child's welfare is at stake. If this story showed you something about Royal Guards you didn't know, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. We share these untold stories from inside the palace every single day. Drop a comment. If you were Sergeant Wright, would you have searched that vehicle, knowing it could end your career? We'll see you in the next one.